of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk of the board, can we have the roll call?
Chair Quila,
Here.
Vice Chair Thompson, I'm here. Commissioner Toyoka,
Here?
Commissioner Webb,
Here.
Commissioner Banks, here.
All right, we had an opportunity to review the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Chair Quila, if I might, real quickly, we have one item on the consent that we would like to remove,
Okay,
and that's item number 9 that will come back at a meeting in January.
okay.
So,
So do we have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Move to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 2-minute presentation about any item on the agenda, except for public hearings or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the board, has any member of the public signed up to speak remotely?
Not remotely. I have a gentleman in the audience here.
Okay. If you're in the audience and wish to speak, please come forward, give your name and address for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
My name is James Nikes, 34755 Highway 101 Business in beautiful downtown Jefferson Gardens, soon to be extinct because of the new biops. Anyway, I'd like to talk a little bit about communication that you had a workshop on recently. And I think that you all take it for granted that everybody is illiterate. You know, you don't take it for granted that there's quite a few of us that are, if not totally illiterate, but mostly illiterate. I have never, ever belonged to a social media of any sort, read any social media of any sort, barely can text, and I couldn't do that if I didn't talk into a phone, which I think is a ridiculous way to communicate, to talk into a phone to have it come out in words on the other end. And one thing that I truly believe that Astoria, the city of Astoria actually does right, if you want to communicate to a lot of us that are not illiterate, that you do as they do, which is very cheap, if not free, is have the radio stations play when the meetings are going to be and the agendas of the meetings. That's what they do, and I get, you know, those all the time. And with all that said, I want to talk about the November 8th Planning Commission vote on these ridiculous geomaps that are nonsensical, to say the least, and the biggest overreach I've ever seen in my life. I'll agree with one of the original statements that we do need accurate geomaps in this county. Therefore, you should never consider this one, and you should get rid of the old ones because they're completely general in nature. Even by your own admission, they're not site-specific, and they're general in nature. So I don't know how you can affect 90% of Clatsop County landowners by these maps that are completely erroneous and created by LIDAR, which is a contour of the earth, and there is never any boots on the ground geology whatsoever. You know, I've just taken aback by all of this, where it's just kind of pushed through. The first thing I ever heard about it was your required mailing by Measure 56, and of course it was wrong. Like the last one we got the mailing on 56 was the websites were wrong. I mean, I don't understand how you can have a vote, and I understand that it's been tabled and going to be put back. And I would really like to be involved in some of this, the BIOP and this. I have a little bit of knowledge of land use. I have a little bit of knowledge of construction. I have a little bit of knowledge of building, home building and everything else. I've been digging holes in this county for 45 years. I've dealt with land use from the beginning of land use in Clatsop County. And I was completely taken aback when I knew absolutely nothing about this stuff. You see, your meeting, they said that they had mailed out to all the affected members and contacted them between a certain date and another certain date through social media and everything else. Well, I was never contacted. I've had multiple geos. I never got contacted or asked a question about any of it. And
Okay.
if I'm supposed,
Thank you, Mr. Nikes. I'm sorry I'm remote here myself, but
fine.
appreciate your comments. Clerk of the board, are there any other members
That's
of the
all that,
audience?
yeah, that's all
Agenda?
that signed up to speak.
Okay. Thank you very much, Teresa. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Has everybody opportunity to review the consent calendar? We have one item that's been removed from the consent calendar.
So,
Any
Mr. Chair, I would move to adopt the consent calendar as amended with the deletion of item 9.
Second?
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar with the deletion of item 9. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Move on to the next item, which is commissioners' reports, and we'll start with Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a busy month in terms of being out of town for conferences. The Association of Oregon Counties had its annual conference, which is a Monday through Friday thing. It's where judges and commissioners and chairs from all over Oregon come together to, as I put it today, to work as a functional family on those issues of public policy that matter most to Oregonians. And it's a good meeting. So I encourage every colleague who can be in the room on Thursday afternoon of AOC Conference Week. That's when the leadership of the organization is elected. That's when any potential changes to the bylaws are voted on, and that's when the budget is adopted. So it's really the important business of the organization done on that day. So I'll put that bee in your bonnet for next November. The second thing that I went to was PNWR, which is the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. That's 5 western states and 5 Canadian provinces. So Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, the long one, Montana, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Yukon Territories, and the Northwest Territories. So it's a big hunk of the North American continent. Leaders come together, business leaders, some governmental folk. Our former House District 32 representative, former County Commissioner Deborah Boone, urged me, pushed me, this is a pushing motion, to go to this because it's where the overriding big issues are talked about. And I can't go over the whole agenda for you. I have a copy of the agenda if anybody's interested in it. We can make copies. It's a chance to meet and create relationship with business and government leaders from all over the region. I urge you to think about going to that as well. In terms of the most significant issues, 9 out of the 10 bodies represented said that housing was their most significant issue. Only Saskatchewan, which has the tar sands and is located more toward the middle of the continent, does not have housing issues. And the Saskatchewan representative pointed out to us that they produce the cleanest petroleum on the planet, which was news to me. Kenwar, again. Then Monday of this week was the Oregon Business Summit. Senator Wyden started it 20 years ago. This was the 20th anniversary of this. And again, it's business leaders, community leaders, education leaders, private nonprofit NGO leaders, all coming together. If you look at, I think it's Tuesday's Oregonian, it quotes incoming Governor Kotek, so you've seen that. It's good to be in the room. It's a little overwhelming. It's a big room, a lot of people, a lot of noise, but it's good to be in the room, again, to be creating relationships, finding common cause to deal with the significant issues. So I'd recommend that as well. That evening there was a dinner co-hosted by AOC, LOC, 250 people this year. Again, business leaders, legislators, county commissioners, figures from education, NGOs, eating a meal together, developing common cause, creating relationship. You see there's a theme here. So that's what I've been doing on that part of the world, going out into the world for Clatsop County. At home, again, it's the potential for workforce housing development in Arch Cape. That's a big concern among my neighbors. I'm looking forward to working with the county manager and the public affairs director to create some informative materials that will, I hope, ease some people's concerns. We all love this place. We all want to do good to it and with it and by it, and communication is the key to that. So that's my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Webb.
Thank you. I too, now that I am able to travel, have had a busy traveling time. First of all, I thought that this was did this make it to everybody's? Okay. This is the proposal for the addition to the Owens Adair building, which is we're going to be taking to the I'm sorry, I'm still having...
Historical Preservation Committee.
Thank you. Thank you. For their approval. This schematic has gone through the entire planning process for the city of Astoria. So this is the final approval step. We have our OHCS tax credit funding. We have some additional grants that have been made that makes it very possible that we're going to be able to turn dirt on this project. We have two challenges that we're going to hear not from the commission itself, but from some citizens, some of whom don't like the exterior skin of the building. Our architects love it. It's metal, actually, which slowly ages into rust, which is one of the newest chic ways to build a building. And we're getting a little pushback from the community about that. There also is some misunderstanding about whether or not this site is slide prone, which it is not, or the city never would have approved it. I think it's a really exciting concept. We have underground, well, sort of first level off-street parking, which our present tenants are absolutely excited about, because for older people or people with disabilities in our glorious winters, being able to keep your car covered is really a great thing, so the tenants are real excited about it. If anybody in the audience has any questions, I have extra copies of this, but this is really an exciting project, and I hope that you all can be as proud of it as well. For the past 2 days, the commissioners of Travel Oregon have been meeting in our fair city. Last night, we entertained them with a dinner at the Food Hub. And this entity, I hope we're going to be able to come maybe with a presentation to this commission to talk about, because it's a pretty exciting economic development issue, I think, that is that's in service especially to our fishers and our small farmers, who are often people who I think we neglect in our economic development efforts. It was a wonderful meeting, and I got an opportunity to give them their welcome and to praise our local tourism development folks who we fund, and to also praise the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, which has been staffing all of the tourism, not staffing, that has been augmenting a lot of our local coastal tourism staff, and have been bringing the messages of stewardship and appreciation for our very fragile environment to our visitors, and to cast all of our marketing messages to be ones that are very strong on stewardship and respect for the local environment. And they were just so excited. Here are people who travel all over Oregon to meet, and of course, Astoria always lights their fire. And so it's always wonderful to meet with people from all over the state who think that we live in a wonderful place, which of course we all believe we do. A couple of weeks ago, Aaron Scar, who is one of the commissioners in Tillamook County, hosted something called a regional housing summit, which was somewhat interesting. She was trying to get together a lot of the people who are working on housing policy and implementation on the North Coast. It was a little confusing because there were a lot of people who I thought should be there who weren't. But there were a lot of people there. There were some developers talking about different developments of housing developments that they're doing throughout the state, actually, and some other efforts. And I think it's always a good idea, as Commissioner Thompson was just saying, to get people in a room and talk to each other about like-minded issues. And so it was interesting. And I think that's all I have. Thank you. Weird not to be able to see.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Toyoka?
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Let's just keep it pretty short. I had a couple of consecutive meetings, one at the Human Services Advisory Committee, and then Public Safety Coordinating Council, hosted by Sheriff Phillips at the new jail facility. So now we conduct meetings there, but we got a nice tour of the facility and the progress. And I think one of my comments was that as a Marine, those are nicer facilities than the barracks we had in the Marine Corps. So the attention to detail, the thoughtfulness, and the processes, once you get the tour, you actually get explained how the process of, from when someone first arrives, how they're handled. You really appreciate how they put the facility together and how much thought was put into it. So anybody that has a chance to tour, I highly recommend it because it's very insightful. I got to go to attend a wildfire AOC conference panel. The only one takeaway I'm going to mention of that is our ODF Wildfire Division Chief mentioned, that the removal and review of the current wildfire risk map because of inaccuracies. The overlay needs review. It's not accurate, it's just too generic. And it has ramifications from HCP to ADUs. And my takeaway from there is I hope that we can have that same sensible approach to some of the geological overlays we're using in our county to look at our sites here that, they're not the most accurate. Can we pull those, review them, and do what is best for the people of this county? So hopefully that's, what I came away from there is that, hey, here's a good thought process. We need to review, step back, and I hope we can adopt that statewide for some of our overlays to help out the people here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Tuioka. Commissioner Banks.
I will echo Commissioner Toyoka on his most recent comments regarding the wildfire map, but also the overlays. And then busy month. So on the 5th, I had Northwest Senior and Disability Services, just closing out the year, and for good or ill, I'm now the vice chair, so that'll be exciting. Moving on, and really it was just kind of a closing of the year, topics, nothing heavy was really addressed, just moving forward into the next year. And then on the 12th, I had CFEDC, and it was a review of the leadership tour, or the tour of leaders, and basically what went well, what didn't, how can we improve, and I think overall it was a resounding success, considering it's been on hiatus for a number of years, and I was blessed to be able to attend almost a duplicate of that with the Board of Forestry. So that was a very exciting tour to be on, and to be able to create relationships that Commissioner Thompson was discussing. It's nice to sit next to somebody in the van, Board of Forestry members, and create relationships and come to the realization with them and them for us that we're not that different, and that we're all here just for the good of community and the good of environment. Moving on to, oh goodness. Oh, tomorrow. It's tomorrow. It's coming in quick. We'll be having our interviews for the fairgrounds manager, and I'm actually really excited for that. Hopefully the candidates that we have are quality, and I'm just looking forward to a resolution there for our fairground and for our fair board. So I'm looking forward to that. And then on the 19th, there's 2 meetings. One is I'm going to give a shout out to our current Representative Weber for her efforts to call a leadership meeting with ODOT and Mr. Jablowski in order to address issues on Highway 30 and that intersection. And so Rep. Weber and her aide has called a group of people that have been very heavily requesting communication, and then part of that effort is going to be the school district there in Napa, myself, Rep. Weber, elect Rep. Javity, and ODOT, obviously, and we're trying to get a number of entities, stakeholders involved in that communication to see where we're at, what we can do, and how we can move forward. And Commissioner Thompson also has been invited. And so it's very near and dear to my heart, and it's difficult when you are in such a small community to have the children of your school district impacted 4 times in 1 month. And so hopefully we can address some of those issues. In communications with our county roads department in order to hopefully figure something out for the school district over there in Lewis and Clark, just making that area a little safer. They're looking into the funding for safe schools in order to improve visibility, and let's slow the heck down, people. And then my last meeting coming up here is going to be on the 19th. Well, not last, obviously, but for my current agenda is the 19th, and that's going to be the Board of Forestry meeting. They will be discussing the private forest accord, and I will be putting in a public comment in regards to a paragraph in that private forest accord that states that even though county land is in the permit area and has to follow the private forest accord and all rules and regulations, we don't get the protections. So it takes out both county and municipality lands, and so parks and so on and so forth. We'd have to follow the rules, but we wouldn't receive the protections of the private forest accord. And so I'll be putting in a public statement of saying that if we're in the permit area, that for obvious reasons, we should be included in the protections. And in saying that, also state lands were excluded from the protections of the private forest accord, even though state lands will also have to be following the rules. And so it's just that weird turn of phrase where if they're following the rules, then they should have the protections. If we're following the rules, we should have the protections. So all's fair and equal is my goal. So yeah, I'll be attending that meeting and entering a public comment. And so that is it for me for today.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Bangs, and thanks to all of my fellow commissioners for all the important work you've been doing and all the work left to do. And I'm sorry that I'm not there to be with you this evening. I also apologize to our the folks that are in the room and joining us online. It's always kind of challenging to do a meeting virtually like this. But I'm ill, like a lot of folks are right now. So I'm recuperating at home and hope to be back and at it soon. So my only comment was, and I made it during the work session, was I spoke to the Seaside Rotary last week and was very thankful to our county manager, Don Boone, and Assistant County Manager, Monica Steele, and PJ Angelini, and Jennifer Benoit with the Communications Department for putting together a really great PowerPoint talking about all that we're doing with the strategic plan, our major projects, our priorities that we have for this year. And it was really well received. And it's, I think, a really good tool for us to go out and kind of sing our accomplishments, because we are doing a lot. And we've built on a strategic plan in our third year now. And there's a lot to be, proud of. So we talked about that being available for our other commissioners that can go out and do the same. And then also for the public to see all that's being done as well. And I'll go ahead and go to our county manager for his update.
Thank you, Chair Quayla, members of the board. Just a reminder that today will be the last board meeting until January 4th. We can change that if anybody would like to meet more frequently, but January 4th will be the next board meeting. Another little reminder is that next Friday, which will be the 23rd, the county will be working half a day. And then we'll obviously have the 26th off, which is the holiday for Christmas. We do, as Commissioner Bangs mentioned, have the fairground manager interviews tomorrow afternoon. And those are on the heels of us going through the first round interviews for both the HR director and for finance director. And we'll be having second rounds of interviews in person for those likely in January. So we are making progress, slow and steady. And I just wanted to share with Chair Quayla and Commissioner Banks that I did have a meeting with Dan Gaffney from the Child Care Task Force. And we had a good conversation. I'm sure he will update you if he hasn't already, so about our conversation.
Yeah.
So, but I'm happy to share my thoughts as well. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Chair Quayla, may I ask a question? Oops, we can't hear you.
You're muted.
Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Webb.
Kind of where are we on the child care task
That was what I
force?
forgot. Can I go ahead?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I did forget something in my update, and it was a child care meeting that we had. It was about 3 hours here. I can't remember what day of the week it was. I apologize. It was this week. And we all met in one room for the first time, and we discussed what went well with this grant program, and a lot went well with this grant program. We've improved capacity. I know that they've shared numbers with media in regards to our increases in capacity. We've also discussed how we are going to approach the grant program for next year. Some numbers that were really highlighted for us was that there is a lot of preschool openings across the county. And so that's actually kind of interesting news, is that most of our facilities are not maxed capacity in regards to preschool. They have open slots. And so, looking at then the infant to 2-year-old, where the infant to 2-year-old appears to be more underserved, it's also more difficult. And one of the big kickers about serving the infant to 2-year-olds is you have to have about 100 kids in order to actually break even. And it's how the state regulates infant to 2-year-olds. And granted, as a parent, I don't mind those regulations because many of those regulations are for safety. But families, the expense is on the back of providers traditionally, and on the backs of families. And so kind of addressing that gap. And Superintendent Hoppus was there, and that was really nice to have the school districts involved. And he expressed that, you know, solving the child care concerns, especially preschool, has been on top priority in our community. And so it was a wonderful conversation, and now we're looking for how this position that Dan Gaffney is filling is going to be served in the future. We're going to be opening it up for interviews to have another. We're still working on the title. I mean, Dan's pretty hard to replace. So it's got to be some magical title that will give him or her that chooses to you know, take this bear on. But we're looking for a backbone for this position. And we talked about CC&R. We talked about the county potentially. We've talked about opening a 501c3. And we've also discussed, what was the other entity? It was another public entity.
It was the community college.
Yeah, the community college, as a backbone holder or position holder for this person, so that person has support. With it comes pros and cons, which was outlined by Dan in his conversation with you. And so the committee will go through those pros and cons in the future, but it looks like, you know, there's a lot of participation and people really care about solving this problem. And
Well, the 100
Mhm.
number blows me away.
Mhm.
I mean, I happen to have 3 grandchildren who are little guys,
Mhm.
and there's nowhere near 100 slots in their daycare. I mean,
Yeah,
that's crazy.
often an entity has to do preschool, 2s, and infants. It's because preschool tends to make a little bit of money, not a lot, but a little bit, and you have a higher capacity with the preschool age. But again, you know, we have lack of buildings, lack of all kinds of things, and also lack of employees that want to actually work in childcare. So that's another issue that we need to work on solving. So, and my legislative concept went through. So it's being presented by Rep. Weber, and hopefully getting some tax rebates for child care providers, and or rolling it into a retirement program through Oregon, through the state of Oregon. So carrots to stay in the business.
Absolutely.
People start child care because they love kids.
Mm-hmm.
We got to try to keep them. And
Has the community college been involved in these
Yes,
discussions?
yes.
Are they prepared or considering a program, a training,
well, I don't want to speak for them other than share what they've shared with us, which is they're in a transitional period, and so it's not a no, but it's not a yes.
Because the workforce board, incidentally, our multi-county workforce board that I sit on, is also grappling with this child care. Be able to go back to them or maybe come back with some ideas from them too. So
I would say that we have solved not a whole lot, but we've done good work. It's definitely long-term planning, and once we solve this issue, it's an ever-evolving problem or concern in our community. And as we swing with the open preschool slots, now we have a lack of 0 to 2. And so it's an ever-changing issue, and we're projecting to be a long-term position. And I was very excited to hear from my fellow committee members that they're looking at like a 5-year long-term plan and then moving past 5 years as we go, so that this isn't going away. Because something that really hit my heart was that the business of childcare is always underfunded, always highly stressed. Many businesses are. But we can't put the financial burden upon the families, but we also can't put the financial burden upon the providers. And so as a community, we need to prop up the third leg of the table. And hopefully split that burden so that it's easier to be managed. I don't know, somebody called it an iron triad, or I don't know. Anyway, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good discussion, Commissioner Bangs, Commissioner Webb. County Manager, did you have anything additional?
No, thank you, Chair Grillo.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item, which is the public hearing this evening. Item number 11 in the agenda, short-term rental moratorium extension number 4 on page 193. So this is the time set for a public hearing on short-term rental moratorium extension. And we'll begin by having the staff report. Can we have the staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Board. For the record, I'm Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. The item that's before your board this evening is consideration of an extension to the existing short-term rental moratorium, which will currently expire on December 24th of this year. If your board approves the extension this evening, it would be good for 180 days, expiring on June 22nd of 2023, and this would be the 4th extension. I just wanted to also remind your board that even if you do choose to approve this extension this evening, that you can rescind the moratorium at any time, so you do not have to wait until June 22nd if the situation evolves or you feel that a change is needed. I just wanted to talk briefly about what's been happening since we initially adopted the moratorium in August of 2025. Your board has adopted a couple of different ordinances, one dealing with zoning, another dealing with the good neighbor requirements and changes to the permit length, along with some other additional changes to operating standards. We know, of course, that the zoning ordinance is going to be subject to a referendum coming up on the May 2023 ballot. But since the other operational standards were approved in April of this year and they went into effect on May 27th, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on where we're at. We have received, since May 27th, when the Good Neighbor standards and the operating standards went into effect, we've received 10 complaints. Some of those complaints had multiple aspects to them. So we've had, all total since May 27th, we've had 5 parking complaints, 5 trash complaints, 5 noise complaints, a complaint about operating without a permit, and 1 complaint about trespassing. So I also wanted to touch briefly about renewals. If your board does choose to accept approve this evening, we will need to look at renewals that will start happening in January of 2023. When we adopted the ordinance in 2018 and we developed the program for the short-term rentals, we developed a 5-year permit. Those started being issued again in 2018, and now coming up in January, they will start to expire and will need to be renewed. So staff did work with County Council. I believe that you should have a memo that he sent to you yesterday regarding the renewal issue, and that the county would be able to issue renewals for existing licenses. So that would address that issue of concern. So staff is recommending approval of the 4th extension of the moratorium. And also, if your board does desire, staff can also prepare additional materials for a briefing that may come up maybe in the first quarter if you do want to continue to discuss your options before we head into that May election. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Community Development Director Henriksen. Do we have any questions from the commission?
Commissioner Toyoka, I do.
Commissioner Toyoka.
Just clarification, if we would, and thank you for the data on the complaints. Is it all, are they spread throughout the county? Is it localized? And now, since part of that was it had to be a named complaint instead of anonymous anymore, so we can try to find out, is there problem areas or is it just all over the county?
So of the complaints that we received, one was in Arch Cape, and then the remainder were equally split for the most part between Cove Beach properties and Clatsop Plains properties. And some of the properties received multiple complaints. We had one property in the Clatsop Plains that had 4 of the complaints that were generated. So they tend to cluster mainly in Cove Beach and Clatsop Plains.
Okay. Same properties, or is it?
There's probably, I think, about 5 properties that generate the most complaints.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission?
This is Commissioner Banks.
Mr. Banks?
In regards to those complaints, was there resolution, validation is the wrong word. But did it come to a resolution? I know that with this good neighbor ordinance, we were firmer on, being a good neighbor. And so what came about from that?
So of the complaints, and again, some of the properties had multiple, so all total we had 17 issues we were dealing with. All 17 of those were resolved. We actually did schedule a hearing with the hearings officer for one of the properties, the one that had the 4 complaints against it. At that point, what we basically came to understand is that the evidence that we were bringing forward to the hearings officer was not sufficient to really bring a, I don't want to use court terms, but a verdict against the property owner. Basically, the complaint was about someone had dumped crackers on the neighboring property owner's lawn, and the property owner picked them up and put them back on the STR property. And so we were having a public hearing about stale crackers. And we knew that they were there, the crackers had been cleaned up. We took it to a hearings officer, and eventually we just said, you know, the violation has been resolved, we're closing the case, and that was the end of it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? And I'm sorry, I can't see people, so maybe just speak up when you have a question. Okay. Anything additional from staff?
No, thank you.
Actually, Commissioner, I had Chair Cleaver, a question.
Yes,
Commissioner Banks.
Commissioner Banks.
Do you feel that the changes that we have made have helped or been effective for staff in order to deal with these situations?
I think that our changes are very good, which doesn't mean that we don't continue to monitor them.
Of course.
And as our renewals come up, a lot of the new changes with the new permit length and everything are going to kick in because that ordinance was not retroactive. We have a lot of people who are voluntarily complying with the good neighbor requirements, but it wasn't a retroactive ordinance. So I think as we move forward, I think we'll begin to have a better picture of how those new regulations are going to assist us.
Excellent. Thank you.
Another question?
Yes, Commissioner Toigo.
So since we have county councilor as well, and Gail, if we were to lift the moratorium, what is the exposure to the county and constituents here?
I will defer that question to council.
Thank you, Commissioner. Excuse me. I think the biggest question would be what would happen if the referendum went through, which would invalidate, the ordinance that you guys did before. And it's really a legally gray area because we know that there was, vacation rentals allowed before the ordinance went through. And if we did anything moving forward, there's a good chance that those would be invalidated and basically illegal. Would the county have any real liability? Probably not, but it could put, people in tough situations if they've invested a lot of money into getting their house ready, and all of a sudden we're telling them, hey, sorry, we can't do this anymore. So as far as the county's liability, there's really not a lot, but there could be consequences for the community.
Yeah,
I just
County
had a
Manager.
follow-up. I just had a follow-up question. I have 3 people in mind right now who have been waiting for us to get out of this moratorium. They're legacy homes, they're homes that they've inherited, and it's really the only way that they're going to be able to keep these homes in the family. And so, is there a way, or would there be a way, or could there be a way for, if say we did come out of a moratorium, that we could be transparent and, I don't know, not legally liable in our communications with those potential new permit holders?
Right, yeah, and that's something that, I'd have to work with the county manager, and it's something I think we'd have to have staff meetings about. It's, something we need some time to work out.
Okay.
Chair Quaylen, members of the board, if that's okay, Chair Quaylen.
Absolutely.
So what I would say, just as a little more context, is that, your board is going to be discussing STRs as we go into the new year. And part of the conversation will be contingency planning for what might happen in May. And so that contingency planning will have to start sooner. And so what I think might be helpful as we contemplate that is to have staff spend a little bit more time looking at really what the various scenarios are and the various outcomes of this, and then look at it through both a legal lens, an administrative efficiency lens, and then really have a conversation about what those impacts are. And then at that point, I think then the board would have the information that you would need to either feel comfortable with the moratorium or to amend the moratorium if based on that information that was something the board wanted to do. I think that at this point, staff, based upon what we know, we're obviously recommending the continuation of the moratorium at this point. But there's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of discussions that will need to take place to consider what any contingency planning might look like. And so what I would say is that, continuing the moratorium at this point is the staff recommendation, and then that gives us time to come back to your board and start the conversations about contingencies, if that is helpful.
Go ahead. Chair Quaylen?
Yes.
I'd like to speak.
Chair Thompson, or Commissioner Thompson, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So in my mind, this is, there are kind of 2 main components of this issue. There's the neighborhood livability issue, and then there's the economics of it. People have a lot to say on both sides. When I hear that there has been, I don't know how much staff time plus the administrative law judge's time to talk about crackers, a bad pun, that's crackers. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would like us, if it's possible, to capture some of the cost of this, because I think maybe my good neighbors who in their heart of hearts really want to see a livable neighborhood are looking at applying, I would say, levers. We need to look at the cost-benefit analysis and the impact on neighborhood livability of this. And I don't want to put more work on you, but there's a price tag for this. There's the cost of not being able to do business, because I've also been approached by several community members who say that their homes are at risk either immediately now or in the future because of our moratorium. On the other hand, I don't see it as a prudent use of our authority to put the county at risk for more lawsuits or more losses. So I want to be legal, I want to be fiscally prudent. I want to see the real data on this, not just what people's perception is. We have to deal with perception, we have to deal with feelings, we have to develop policies that take people's heart and soul into account. We also have to look at the numbers. So I'm in favor, I think, of continuing the moratorium until until we can be assured that we are behaving in a way that is most prudent for the financial well-being and the best use of taxpayer dollars. I also don't want to see what I think has been the deterioration of neighborhood livability that has accompanied the unresolved conflicts in this area. So I appreciate that the county manager is working with the community development director to move us forward in this area of land use planning, and we have to start looking at the money and the cost of these complaints. So I'm interested in cost-benefit analysis if that isn't too onerous for staff.
Thank you, Commissioner, and that's certainly something as we move forward into the new year that we can add to our analysis.
Thank you.
I had a comment.
Commissioner Banks?
And it's actually a question for Director Hendrickson. Were any of these complaints in areas of HOAs?
I would have to double check. I think 2 of the properties are in an HOA.
Okay, because, I mean, it's a consistent, I don't know, battle that we've been in. We haven't been in it, but the HOAs in Clatsop Plains and other areas, that they've voted to permit STRs. And so I guess I'm just wondering where our lane is or what's in our purview in regards to this issue. I know that this community of concern, we've encouraged to incorporate, and we've encouraged them to take up this battle for themselves. And I really hesitate to do a countywide anything when it's such a small area that we are addressing. Now, I know that this is a public hearing. Is there a way to amend this motion to state that we will circle back in January of 2023, or is January too soon, County Manager?
I think January might be a little too soon
Okay.
to pull all the materials and to have a conversation about the contingencies. It's just going to take county council and staff time to do that. But I think what my commitment is that we will have a conversation about when we might have that ready, and then we can come back to your board. And I would suggest it may not need to be part of the actual motion, but the direction from the board to us is to come back as soon as possible and start those conversations.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to finish the thought of just circling back because as a board, when we made this ordinance, we did so with the best information, and I fully support the decision that we made as a board, and I don't want to walk it back. And so I feel like we followed what was best for our county legally, but also what was best for the county as a whole. And so I want to be careful that we don't give the appearance that we are walking back an ordinance, more so that we are being cautious and cognizant of future or potential outcomes after the May election. And so if we can somehow translate that, that's going to be great. I know that's a lot. I'm so sorry, County Manager.
No, Commissioner Bangs, member of the board, I think that staff really wants to provide the information that will allow you to feel comfortable with what this may look like prior to the May election, and then what that may look like after the May election, because we will find out something in May. And so, and so I just think having conversations about what those contingencies might look like, and then to really understand the potential outcomes of the various, outcomes is going to be really important, because there are legal and administrative challenges that are going to come from almost any option that we address. And so, so I just want to be very clear and concise and as reflective as we can be so that your board feels like you have what you need as we enter into spring. So,
Chair Cuellar?
Commissioner Webb?
Yeah. I think I've had lots of discussions with my Lincoln County colleagues, and I am very nervous about taking a lot of initiatives prior to the May election. I think we need to get ready. I think we need to consider what we would do if it passes and what we would do if it doesn't pass. But I think a lot of public, it's not so much public, but a lot of staff time actually spent on alternatives, yada, yada. I just hate to do that to our staff. And I think it might be time for us to lay low a little bit about this with the upcoming election, because anything we do is going to influence that election. And so I think we have to be very careful about coming forward with various ideas that will become a component in that election. And I'd much rather focus on, if it passes, what do we do? Let's be ready. And if it doesn't pass, let's be ready.
and
But I just don't think it should be, first of all, a lot of staff time spent on it. But secondly, most importantly, just a lot of public discussion. It makes me kind of nervous.
Commissioner Webb, I think that probably I'm saying the same thing you just said, is that what I am suggesting is that the county have those conversations about what if it does pass, what if it doesn't pass, and then what are the implications and what are the administrative, actions that the board, staff, through our legal counsel's, input, what we would have to do. I mean, that's really what the core of our conversations are, because there are a number of options that the board will have, whether it passes or whether it doesn't pass. And so I just think that us having those conversations prior, because what will happen is that after the election gets certified, then, basically 30 days after is when it will go into effect. So there's a pretty constrained timeline. And so it's not going to give us time and the board time through the land use process to really be prepared. So I just think the conversations will just line up what those options are, but I see it really contained to what if it does and what if it doesn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, County Manager. Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Do we have any other questions from the commission? If not, this will be the time to open up the public testimony. So I will go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does any commissioner have a conflict of interest to report? No.
Chair Cuellar, I was told that an accusation was made that I had a conflict of interest because I liked some of the people involved better than other people involved on another side of this issue. I just like to point out that that is not a conflict of interest, and I do my best to treat everyone with fairness. But no, I have no conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Okay, we'll move on to the clerk of the board. Are there any members of the public signed up to speak? And let's start first with the remote testimony.
No, there's not.
Okay, if you have signed up to testify, and I'm just looking at, do we have anybody that is on remotely that do plan to speak or would like to speak at this time?
Yes.
Okay, and let me just let you know that if you please wait until you're called on, give your name and address for the record, and I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, so Chris, if you can give your full name and address, and then 2 minutes.
Chris DeLong, address 36687 Christians Lane, Astoria, Oregon, 97103. I've testified before. We were latecomers to this whole to this whole process. Didn't realize there was a moratorium. Went to turn our house over to STR and was told that there's a moratorium, and that was quite a while ago. I don't know what more needs to be looked into. It seems like the other side has done a very good job of continuing to put hurdles and roadblocks in front of you guys to make a final decision. And even when the final decision is made, then they get it on the ballot. It's just one more thing that they have done in order to, I guess, manipulate you guys or hamstring you guys or stop you guys from making a decision and moving on. This is, again, it's not, this is not fake money. This is real life. It affects those in the community. And the thought of somebody losing their childhood home because they can't pay 2 mortgages because of this extension again. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know the exact dates, but if it's 30 days after the May election, that would be nearly 2 years. And I could be wrong about that this moratorium is put in place. And I think that's more than adequate time. I think all the allegations and the complaints have been proven to be not true or not hold weight. And I don't know where I'm at with my 2 minutes, but frankly, what I think this is a bunch of very rich people in private neighborhoods that want to keep their private beaches to themselves. And they do not want to allow anybody in any other class to roll in there and enjoy our Oregon coast on an affordable price. And I think if they say anything else, it's just intellectually dishonest of them because they just want their private beaches in their private communities. This is affecting me, and I beg you guys, please go ahead and end the moratorium tonight. This has been gone on long enough.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for your comments. Anyone else that's joined us virtually here that would like to make a comment at this time?
I would, Mr. Chair, this is John Meyer.
Okay, John, if you can give your name, address, or full address, and then 2 minutes to speak. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. It's John Meyer, and our home is at 3185 Clatsop Lane in Arch Cape. I want to, first of all, I tell you that I appreciated hearing Chris DeLong's comments. They reflect the sentiment of hundreds of people that we've been working with on the issue of short-term rentals over the last couple of years. At great expense, this has been going on, and the hurdles of the roadblocks from a select few group of individuals in this community is an embarrassment. But beyond that, I wanted to say that this commission can't sit back and not take a position on various things, because in so doing, it is influencing the public's perception of the May vote. There are, we're preparing a letter to send to you, which will come out shortly. And it talks about a misrepresentation on the website of the county commission, which says that if this referendum is passed, short-term rentals will be eliminated in unincorporated Clatsop County. That statement could not be further from the truth. So we have to get a sit down or a session working with staff in the county to get this cleared up as quickly as possible, because I don't believe the county wants to be in a position where it's actually promoting and making public statements that are completely inconsistent with the new LUBA regulations. So thank you for your time. We hope to work with you in a positive and constructive manner. We've formed a new nonprofit, Everyone for the North Oregon Coast, and it is stakeholders in the business community, in the home ownership community, rental property managers, and we want to work with you to get a positive result here, that we can get this community back together and acting as a community of people that share common goals. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, John. Anyone else that's joining us virtually that would like to speak? You have 2 minutes. Okay, I'm not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move to the folks in the room there. Is there any member of the audience who wishes to testify?
No, there's not.
Okay. Do we have any test or responses from staff to any of the testimony?
No, thank you.
We'll go ahead and open it up for board discussion.
Do you want a motion on the table before the discussion or after?
I think you can make the motion now if you want and discuss, or you can discuss and then make the motion. But most of all, I do need to close the public hearing since we've had our public testimony, both virtually and in the room. We'll go ahead and close the public testimony.
Is there any way I say 10 more seconds?
No, you've had an opportunity.
Thank you, Mark.
Chris. Thanks. And everybody, if you could mute if you're joining us virtually, please. Okay, then we'll go ahead and open it up for the board.
Let me make the motion and then we'll have the discussion if that's agreeable. Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of Commissioners approve the resolution and order extending the moratorium on the licensing and processing of new short-term rental applications to June 22nd, 2023.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I will start then.
Yeah.
So, as elected, I vowed to represent the constituents who put me here. And if I go by that, I would say we have, 80% or more, and my correspondence is public, that are for short-term rentals and for removing this moratorium. There is a smaller, a group that wants to retain it, and I understand both positions, and I have personal feelings, which I disregard, because, I've vowed to represent those of my district. I have a short-term rental across the street, and I know the neighbor who lives directly next door to that is not very favorable for short-term rentals. You do get the odd people in there, but if I am to represent my entire district, I would say we need to lift the moratorium and move forward with the safeguards we have in place. And that would be my input as, representing my district.
Yep, thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. And then
I
who
can
else?
comment next.
Commissioner Banks?
Yeah. So I have a similar sentiment, but it circles back to property rights for me. I grew up at the knee of a man who was very firm on, if you want to control what your neighbor does, buy their property. You cannot control what another does with their property if they are doing whatever it is that they're doing within the realm of the law and ordinance. And we are currently battling something called the HCP, where people are trying to tell us what we need to do with our property. And we're battling a number of other entities that have decided, what is best for us without our input. And I know that my constituents elected me to protect property rights and to protect the rights of those who own the land. And if we continue kicking this rock down the road, I don't feel like I'm doing that. And I feel like we passed some very good ordinances to help protect the neighborhood, to be good neighbors, to encourage that. And I'm sure that that's going to be an ever-evolving situation for us as a board. I don't think short-term rentals will ever be off of our plate. I am voicing frustration that I feel like I'm solving a problem that was started long before my tenure here. And I feel like a lot for our county staff, we're solving an issue that was created before our tenure. And we're being asked to make a decision. And I frankly feel like continuing this moratorium is continuing punitive measures against landowners like Chris. And those are the landowners that talk to me. Those are landowners that are in my area. Those are the landowners I'm representing. And so if I continue to vote for a continuation of this moratorium, I'm not representing the people that elected me. And so I need to be a voice for them in this situation and for those legacy landowners who don't want to lose their inheritance, their home that their family has had for a number of years. And I don't want to be punitive to the middle class. And I feel like if we are going to continue this moratorium, we are being punitive to the middle class, those who cannot afford to continue under the pressures that this has created. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Any further discussion from the board?
Yes, this is
Commissioner Webb?
Commissioner Webb. I will be voting to continue this moratorium because I think that not doing it now will send us into a bit of very fraught confusion. And we're facing an election, which I think is going to be a very divisive, one more divisive election in our community. When people are really pitted against each other. There are a lot of things in this discussion that I think are just incredibly divisive. And I think that if we want to protect middle class interests in this county, what we need to do is to not allow short-term rentals, because it would open up a much larger supply of housing for people who can't afford to own two homes. And I just greatly, I believe that what happened in Lincoln County was so incredibly divisive in that county. Neighbors against neighbors. It was just a really complex event for the entire county. And I really believe that right now we need to continue on our path. If we rescinded this now, we would have, our planning staff would be doing nothing but STR applications for the next 6 months, 4 months. And I think that would be just incredible, and I think it would be, depending on the outcome of the election, it could also put us in some really hairy legal binds. And I think we've been going down this path now, time and again. We've done a lot of consideration of different parts of the county, and I just think this is putting us into confusion when this county and this commission has a lot of work to do on other issues other than STRs. And I think that not renewing this moratorium is an incredibly imprudent way for this commission to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wasn't this interesting? I find something to agree with and something to disagree with what each one of my commissioners have said. So in my neighborhood, when I bought a house in 1999, I could buy it for $200,000, and I could keep one nostril above the wave working in this tourism economy, and I could eke out a living. But I'm telling you, it was difficult, and that's with a $200,000 house. I don't know where you can find a $200,000 house in Clatsop County anymore. So the idea that somehow to forbid or do away with short-term rentals would make housing affordable just doesn't make economic sense to me. And with all due respect that that's your opinion, it doesn't pencil out for me because I don't see that the cost of housing anywhere will allow that. When I look at my district, I have people telling me very firmly, very clearly, and not always very kindly, that they are voters and they should count more, their opinion should count more than people who are part-time residents. Now, some part-time residents are affluent, dual income, no kids, so they can afford a second home without renting it out. For many of the people who operate short-term rentals in my neighborhood and who can't afford to live there because they have to have jobs somewhere else and they have to rent it out part-time because they are struggling to maintain their middle-class capacity, and they are democratizing, in their view, our neighborhood and this part of the coast. And what I also know is, with the advertising that has happened, as Commissioner Webb, you pointed out, the Tourism Association and the Coast Visitors Association and all of these, we've had extensive marketing, we've had population increases, we have more and more people coming here. They will either contribute to our economy and they will or will not be good neighbors. Because again, I'm back to it's a two-headed issue. It's the economy of it, and it's who can be a good neighbor and who's willing to be a good neighbor. And I came into this thinking I knew how I wanted to vote, and now I'm not sure. So, Chair Quila, what do you have to say about this?
Well, I think this has been good discussion. I appreciate the public testimony and understand their position, understand what Commissioner Bangs and Commissioner Toyoka have argued. I do believe we need to continue to extend the moratorium, and I will vote in favor of that, just because there has been good work done. We're talking about a good neighbor policies and what the staff has accomplished, but there's still work to do, and I do want to hasten that work so that we aren't waiting until summer to actually have it come back to us. But I do think at this point in time, it makes sense to continue the moratorium and hope that we can get a more speedy resolution on the outlying issues, hopefully in the next few months.
So, Chair Quayle, if I may then. So colleagues, may I? Thank you. So to the extent we agree, to the extent we disagree, my concern is what's the bottom line for county taxpayers? And when I've had conversation with the county manager, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, sir, my understanding is we create murky ground in the interim between now and whenever that vote is, to the extent that we approve new short-term rentals. And to avoid that murky ground, I'm inclined to vote to continue the moratorium, because legal bills, that's a geometric curve, legal bills. I've dealt with that, and I want to avoid that. I do want to prepare so that as quickly as possible we can resolve this, work on our more important issues, and work on resolving our differences. So I really think I need to keep this moratorium in place.
Do we have any further discussion? Yes, Commissioner Banks.
So I'm looking at this issue two ways. One, I'm really unwilling to continue past May with this moratorium, mainly because we give the impression that we might have done something wrong when we passed this ordinance. And I do not feel like we did anything wrong when we passed this ordinance. And when we talk about potentially navigating the situation or swaying voters, the closer we get to May, the more sway. And so the longer we talk about this, the murkier the water gets, so on and so forth. But it circles back to when we originally passed this ordinance, we passed it under the guidelines to basically get the county out of legal consequences. We were operating STRs in unincorporated areas ever since 2018, a previous commission. And so we were resolving an issue, and I don't think that we were wrong in resolving that issue. But the longer that we sit and push this rock down the road, the longer that we give the appearance that we did do something wrong. And I don't believe in my heart that I did anything wrong in passing that ordinance. And so I did it for the taxpayers so that we weren't going to face punitive measures. And so somewhere along the way, those waters got murky. Folks had different ideas of why we passed an ordinance. For me, it was pretty simple. Long conversations with the county manager for me and with our county council at that time. It was pretty simple. I was protecting taxpayers. I was protecting property rights. And for me, it's still that simple. I'm protecting taxpayers and I'm protecting property rights. And I understand that there's a little murkiness if somebody applies for a permit, but I feel like transparency is key here. And when we move forward, if we are allowed to move forward, that we are transparent with those people that are receiving the permits. We are in the middle of facing a referendum, but being transparent with people receiving permits, who have the potential to receive permits, I feel like, what more can we do? I do not feel like it's a good answer to solve a housing crisis by letting somebody lose their home so that it's open up for workforce housing. I don't feel like that's a good process for us to follow. And so I want to protect constituents like Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Any further discussion from the board? If not, we do have a motion. Oh, Commissioner Toyoka.
Oh, county manager wants to talk.
Oh, County Manager.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair Coelho, members of the board. So I thank the board for all of your perspectives from the staff's chair. What I would say is that staff wants to support the board and its decisions the best that we possibly can. In this case, if it would be an amenable path forward, is that if you can give me time to talk with staff about how much time it'll take us to kind of wrestle with some of the process issues because there are, if we maintain the moratorium, there are things that we still have to discuss with the board moving forward as a contingency. If the board decided that they wanted to at some point end the moratorium, then there are implications for that too, and we haven't presented those to your board. And so what staff would like to do is at least have the time to provide the context to your board, and we can try to expedite that conversation. If the board would like us to do that in January, we can at least start that in a work session so that we can talk about the consequences and the contingency planning sooner than later. So all I am, from staff's perspective, just because we're not really clear what the implications would be, is that we just like the time to reflect upon what those are and then come back to your board. And your board still has the full palette of options, but then that way staff can at least provide some of that context for you. And if we can do that in January, then that will hopefully begin the conversation. And if the board wants to give us direction at that time, then we can timely move it forward. I just want to make sure that staff can support whatever decision that your board makes. So thank you.
Thank you, County Manager. Any further discussion? Now we have a motion and we have a second. And
One more piece of discussion.
Oh, Commissioner Toyoka. Commissioner Toyoka.
So could we give staff directions right now instead of taking a vote, give directions, say come back? But, I'm in favor of lifting the moratorium, but I don't want to do it at the expense of the constituents. So, and we don't know the full downsides, and that's what you will tell us. And I don't think the constituents in my district know the full downside either. So I would, supportive of their request, but I think if we know the full information of what the downside is, then we make a better informed decision as a board. So I would be willing to, defer to the staff to give us that information until we meet again in January, which is only a few weeks away, really, and not have a vote now and just say, give us more information, so we can actually make an informed decision on the best interests of our constituents.
But the problem is that the moratorium ends
Yeah.
in a few days.
Yeah, moratorium ends before next meeting.
Commissioner Toyoka, members of the board, I think, so staff will expedite our work in trying to create some additional information that will hopefully lend to additional context for your board's future decision. We will expedite that. Once we have a chance to really talk as a staff, I can work with your board in scheduling that work session as quickly as possible, and that could be that will be in January. And then, but what I would suggest is the board still extend this, knowing that if the board gets information that would make you want to reconsider the moratorium, then we will schedule it for a work session anytime thereafter. I mean, it is your board's discretion on whether the moratorium ends up being 180 days or whether it ends up being something else. And so I would just like to be able to lay that out for the board so that you have the information you need. We just became very compressed for a lot of good reasons in terms of all the other priorities the county has. But I do want to help support your decision making. So, and I don't know if that suffices, but I think that is what I would suggest as maybe a path forward that would align with what the intention of the board is, which is to have more information and more context.
Can I follow up with a comment?
Yes, Commissioner Banks.
So I'm going to express what has occurred over the last 2 years since I entered this conversation with short-term rentals. I have had conversations with constituents, the moratorium will end, it expires at this date. Just hang on, it'll be fine, it expires this date. Hang on, it expires this date for 2 years. Or it will be 2 years coming up. And at what point does my word to these constituents become the fact that I don't care? I mean, I care way too much about this topic. I think I care way too much about these people and what they're going to lose. And so, as patient as I would like to be, and as careful as I would like to be moving forward, it feels very disingenuous to me because I've told these people, just be patient. It's going to be okay. Just be patient. It's going to be okay. And in January, if we pass this and say, hey, let's continue with the moratorium until after the May election, because I'm not sure what is so contentious about our upcoming May election. I guess I just feel like we're just kicking this rock and people are suffering, and I am not. So do we need a regular session to vote to stop a moratorium if it passes? Or can we do it at a work session?
No. Commissioner, if the board extends the moratorium, then that would be done in a regular session through board action. If the board ended up wanting to rescind the moratorium at some point during the 180 days, that would also have to come to the board for official action during a regular meeting.
Pardon me, point of order. Couldn't we have a special meeting with 24 hours notice?
Yes, I mean, we can still have special meetings, but it would still be at a at a formal board meeting.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, Commissioner Thompson?
I'm choking on this, literally. This is so difficult. As Chris said, this is real world. This is people's money, people losing their homes. I mean, that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. And yet, I think the best path forward is to do, as the county manager suggests, give staff time to give us impact information, and then we act just as quickly as possible, whether we're unanimous or a majority vote, to proceed. Because with 24 hours notice, we can have a special meeting after a work session. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Do we have any other comments or questions before I call the question? Again, the motion is that the Board of Commissioners approve the resolution and order extending the moratorium on the licensing and processing of new short-term rental applications to June 22nd, 2023. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Clerk of the board, can we have a roll call vote?
Chair Quila,
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Toyoka,
Nay.
Commissioner Webb,
Aye.
Commissioner Banks. Nay.
Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you, Community Development Director Henriksen and staff. And I really appreciate.
Chair Quayler,
Yeah, County Manager.
I apologize for interrupting. I just want to confirm with the board that the board is interested in staff coming back in January to have that further conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
yeah.
County Manager.
Just wanted to confirm. So.
I appreciate you doing that, and certainly we're all interested in resolving this as soon as possible. So thank you. Let's move on to the business agenda this evening. First item is the appointment to Northwest Oregon Commission on Transportation, which is page 202. And do we have a staff presentation?
Chair Quayler, that would be me. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking here.
I know.
Chair Quayler, members of the board, this agenda item is to make an appointment to the Northwest Oregon Area Commission on Transportation. The jurisdictions representing Columbia, Clatsop, Tillamook, and Western Washington counties were granted a charter by the Oregon Transportation Commission establishing Northwest Act. The mission is to provide a forum for information, discussion, and coordination of transportation issues, recommend state transportation investment priorities, advocate Northwest Oregon transportation issues, and to advise Oregon Transportation Commission on policies and priorities. Kathy Klezak's term will expire December 31st, 2022. Staff advertised on October 20th for a vacancy to be filled by January 2023. One application was received from Ms. Klezak, and her application is now forwarded to your board for consideration. Staff is asking that your board approve the appointment of Kathy Klezak to the Northwest Oregon Area Commission on Transportation with the term ending December 31st, 2024.
So moved. I beg your pardon, I'd like to make that motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm coming in as the chair of Northwest Act, so I'd like to do that because I wanted to speak. It's okay, we hadn't talked about that. If I could, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner Webb. I've worked with Kathy Klezak for several years on this and other transportation issues. She is the best committee member you could ever hope to have. So I would like the privilege of moving to approve the appointment of Kathy Klezak to the Northwest Oregon Area Commission on Transportation Northwest Act with a term ending December 31st, 2024.
May I second this motion?
Yes.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the appointment of Kathy Klezak to the Northwest Oregon Area Commission on Transportation with the term ending December 31st, 2024. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is the Public Safety Coordinating Council. And this is the lay citizen appointments on page 210.
Thank you, Chair Aquila, members of the board. Kelly Broughton, Director of the Juvenile Department and the current Chair of Public Safety Coordinating Council. This is in reference to a lay citizen position appointments by, which is an appointment to be made by your board. We had 3 total applications. The discussion of your board was to have 1 to represent the unincorporated areas of Clatsop County and 1 in the incorporated areas. We had 2 applications inside the incorporated areas, and so there was a vote by the voting members of PSCC to forward 2 nominations to the board. For the unincorporated area was Jonathan Shaver, who actually is here in the room, and the other was Josh Marquis for the incorporated areas. There was one other application for your consideration of Rick Newton in the incorporated areas. So at this point, our recommendation from the PSCC is to have Jonathan Shaver and Josh Marquis as members as lay citizens to the Public Safety Coordinating Council.
Well, I'd like to accept Public Safety Coordinating Council's recommendation for lay citizen appointments to the PSCC.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the Public Safety Coordinating Council's recommendations for lay citizen appointments to the PSCC. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we have no other items on the agenda this evening. So we'll move on to the good of the order. Do we have anything for the good of the order this evening? All right. If not, we will go ahead and adjourn. Have a good night, everyone.